And this afternoon's session is on trauma-informed peer support. Our two speakers today, we have a little bit of a change. One of our speakers is Tracy Puglisi. Tracy's right here. Tracy is the coordinator for peer recovery and wellness for the Association of Mental Health and Wellness, formerly known as the Clubhouse. I always call it the Clubhouse of Suffolk, one of the best agencies in the state. And Tracy's here to talk to us. And the other hand, the handsome gentleman to her right is Josh Gran, and Josh is not only a very enthusiastic guy, but Josh is the Chief Operating Officer for People Incorporated, one of the premier peer support agencies in the state, if not in the country, and maybe even beyond that. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tracy and Josh.
So my name is Tracy Puglisi, and I do want to say I identify as a person that has been given a psychiatric diagnosis. I consider myself a trauma survivor and assistance survivor, and I'm very passionate about human rights and social justice. That being said, I have to say I was a little nervous about coming to speak at the conference because I feel a little underqualified as a white woman, a person who's not a refugee or an immigrant myself, and I'm here to speak about trauma-informed peer support. So I just want to say when I'm speaking about it, it'll be in the general sense of trauma-informed peer support, and I need to say that for myself. I want to thank and give credit to two wonderful women who reside in Albany. Their names are Darby Penny and Kathy Cave, and they really came up with the concept of trauma-informed peer support. There's also, through Snapchat, it's in draft, but there's a booklet in draft form that never got out, so you can get it online, called Engaging Women in Trauma-Informed Peer Support, and it's wonderful, and in my opinion, it could be used for men too. Yeah, so trauma-informed peer support. I actually got introduced to this through a wonderful organization up here in Albany called the Mental Health Empowerment Project, and we do a training at my organization that's very much based in human rights and trauma-informed peer support. And part of the training we do is the tips to trauma-informed peer support, and they help to train me to give this, co-facilitate this training. What it is, so there's certain values with peer support. So there's mutuality, there's that giving respect. Yes, reciprocity. So an important thing I think to realize about peer support in general is it's not a hands down helping someone up. It is two people being with each other, being side by side, and that's really what peer support is. Good peer support that works well, is both people should be giving and taking at the same time. And that's really, I think, an important piece of peer support. And we can't talk about being trauma-informed without talking about culture. And I think a big part of it is, like, we call it cultural competence. I have a hard time with competence. I don't really feel like I'm competent in all cultures. So I'd like to say, like, an awareness of culture, of coming from it with curiosity. So instead of thinking like we're the experts and we know everything when we're doing support, we actually come from a place of curiosity and learn from the other person. And I think that also helps to break down a lot of barriers, because while we like to say peer support is non-judgmental, like, we're human. We all have judgment. I think it's really stopping and coming from a place of intention, like I'm making a judgment based on my worldview, based on what I know, what I came into this world with. And when we're working with other people, when we're spending time and being with other people, we have this opportunity to sit with them and learn about them and learn why they have this worldview. And it can really just be this, like, really rewarding relationship for both people involved. It's really important to say that this isn't about, like, looking at what's wrong with a person. It's really about finding out what happened to a person and what they've been through in life. And I could just say for myself, getting around, like, the peer movement and learning about all this stuff was, like, a big step for me. when I kind of succumbed to the mental health system and kind of went into it, I was told a lot of things I couldn't do, like I couldn't work, I really couldn't parent, I had two beautiful children, I couldn't have relationships, and I was told all these things. And being around people that noticed my strengths, being around people that noticed those things that people told me were bad things about me were actually good things. I get to use those things that people told me were bad things, like in my job now, which is like kind of awesome. And that wouldn't happen without the trauma-informed peer support. That wouldn't happen without a person sitting across saying like, why are you so angry? Why are you pushing me away? Like, let's talk. Where does that come from? Let's talk about it. And so in the class, when we do the trauma-informed peer support, when we do the cultural awareness, we get to see kind of like a shift that happens, and a shift from like judgment to wanting to learn from each other and about one another. And I think when that happens, like great things can happen. We could really take the opportunity to get to know one another and not have those judgments happen. Are there any questions? Yes.
What is cultural awareness? Can you explain to me?
Cultural awareness is like, so we're all come from like our different, whether our location, our families, our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, anything like that we consider define us as a person. Some we were born with. Some are stuff that we choose. Some are stuff that were like given to us and we can move away from. So all that stuff is culture. And coming from different places, we can all have different views on things. So just think about like political views. Like that's a really like supercharged thing. With being trauma informed and with being culturally curious, like we could actually have conversations and learn where people are coming from, like about different views and different issues. It doesn't have to be like, well, this is, instead of like be like, well, this is wrong and this is where I'm coming from, being more like, oh, that's interesting. What makes you think that way, or where is that coming from? And you can learn really from a person who can say, well, my family really believed in this, and that's like why they went to that, or maybe the area that they live in is very, towards one belief than the other. It's really just, it's coming from this being curious about the other person instead of being like, I know it's right, this person is wrong. And I think that's really what we get to learn. It's not, you hear culture. I'll give an example. I do the training, and somebody in our training, super smart guy, but book smart, and started talking about the Asian culture from books. And people were like, this is a peer support training. People were getting up, leaving the room, like all upset. Like, so we invited. It turns out the person said, well, I read a lot, and I really don't socialize a lot. I don't really have any friends or people that I talk to. And he labeled himself with having Asperger's, he said. And after that happened, like after people heard where he was coming from, like an amazing thing happened. Like people started to, like when he talked, they would like, they would talk with him and explain like, well, this is why I don't like to be spoken about this way. And it just was like a beautiful thing. So we got to really see the peer support happen within the classroom. And somebody who in the beginning of class, people were like getting upset and walking out of the room, by the end of the class, it was just such a supportive environment. It was just, it helped him to learn and grow. It helped people in the class to learn and grow. And I mean, let's face it, when we're sitting across from somebody, we're really not going to know who they are or what their views are. So, I mean, this is really a way to have a conversation. My daughter actually came to a training once, and she got, afterwards I asked her, like, it was about peer support. I asked her, like, what she thought. And she's like, I think you move around too much when you talk about me. I said, okay, no. I was like, what do you think about the topic? She's like, Mom. She's like, and I think she was 15 at the time. She's like, this is really easy. This is just being nice to people and listening to them. And I mean, she really just got it. Like, she really just got what it is. And that's really what this is. Instead of like knowing what's right, and this is what this group of people look like coming from and really getting to know what that person is.
Okay, maybe we'll ask Josh to pick up now. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first, my name is Josh Gran. I work for People Incorporated. We started in the mid-Hudson Valley in Ulster County. Actually, our headquarters is in Dutchess County now. We started in 1990 as projects to empower and organize the psychiatrically labeled. And we have pretty rich foundational ties to the peer movement. Sometimes it's called, I think, like Celia said before, consumer, survivor, patient, ex-patient movement. Like Tracy, I've been labeled with a couple of labels actually, and they always have more labels, you know. That was a pretty horrific and I would say traumatic time, probably in both of our lives, when you first encounter your label and your psychiatric diagnosis becomes a way to define you. And I think, you know, Tracy brought up a great point before that, you know, trauma-informed care is about shifting the perspective from what's wrong to what happened. And it really empowers people to start thinking about themselves not as symptoms or labels, and more as storytellers. And we all have a story to tell. And, you know, so ours starts, People Inc. starts back in 1990. And, you know, Celia mentioned some of those greats like Judy Chamberlain and Dan Fisher, and, you know, these were real pioneers. One of our founders was Sally Clay, who I'm sure Celia knows. And Sally Clay tried to update Judy Chamberlain's famous book, On Our Own, which was about alternatives, peer-run alternatives to the mental health system. And that was, I think, published in the late 70s. And one of our founders, Sally Clay, created On Our Own Together, which tried to pull together a lot of best practices in the field of peer services. And we've evolved since we started. We started as just an advocacy agency. And this was a time when people were more and more restricted from leaving institutions. And not to say that it's not happening still, that is certainly not true. It is happening still. But people like Judy Chamberlain, Sally Clay, these are people on the front lines, people that said this is not a life for people. And so when Tracy says there's two rules sometimes for different groups, or there's different rules for all sets of people. You know, there's different rules for women, there's different rules for African Americans, there's different rules for people with disabilities. I think a real trauma-informed approach to not only care, but to society is one that says, you know, one rule for everyone. We started as an advocacy agency, and then we started to provide, I think, more direct services, what you have become known as peer services. And it's been interesting because over the years we've had to evolve and learn more. And part of that, I'd say, in the last 5 or 6 years is really learning about trauma and trauma-informed care. Tracy mentioned Darby Penny and Kathy Cave. We participated in a learning collective with them. I wonder if we actually even met on like a video chat once with them. But that book it's a large pamphlet, but I call it a book because it's quite large. But it's called Engaging Women in Trauma-Informed Peer Support. That book is amazing. And if you're interested in the idea of trauma and trauma-informed care, I would tell you that you can find it online. I did last night when I was actually preparing for this, because Steve Michio, my boss, was supposed to be here. I will, you know, be the Joe Biden to his Obama right now, but he can speak much more about that. So I went back to that book. That book was amazing and really opened my eyes about what that means. And I think Tracy distilled it perfectly. It's about putting your assumptions away. And so what I wanted to talk about today was, what is trauma? what is trauma-informed approach, and I'm going to actually refer to Darby and Kathy for the trauma-informed approach, how they define it. And then I was going to talk about kind of how we've incorporated that into what we do. So I think the SAMHSA definition of trauma is pretty interesting because it talks about what are called 3 E's, which is events, experiences, and effects. And that, what I find interesting about that is the events are the objective things that happen, the traumatic events themselves. And that could be one event, it could be a series of events. Trauma can be having something explode next to you versus being sexually assaulted over and over for 10 years. It's a large spectrum, you know, and I think Tracy mentioned that before, that, you know, there's all sorts of types of traumas. You know, the trauma of being a refugee is certainly very severe and deserves to be listened to with respect, the stories that come out of there. There's the experiences, that's the subjective stuff. That's how we make meaning of these things. And I think in peer support, we're very interested in those things. That's where we come in as part of this overall system of healing and say, what is your experience with this? You know, how do you make meaning of what happened to you? Do you look at it as something awful? Do you look at it with shame and guilt? I mean, many of our peers have lived lives, and, you know, I can speak about my own mother who went through a very traumatic childhood. And I watched her work through a lot of that shame and guilt in her adult life and carry it around. And you know, I think women, unfortunately, in our society are conditioned to feel that way a lot of times when they're victims of sexual assault. Shame and guilt. It was somehow their fault. So we make meanings, we ascribe meanings to what happens to us, but we also, like Tracy said, it's in a cultural context, you know. We don't live in a vacuum, and our meanings are tied up with who we are. It could be, you know, you're a woman, you're an African American, you know, Latino communities have a certain way of dealing with issues, you know, and one thing that we need to do is to not assume that when we engage with each other that we understand everyone's culture perfectly, because it's not about, you're not gonna have good results then. That's really what it is. It's you can go to a very simple argument and say you're not really respecting that person. I think that should always be a goal of interactions, and especially mental health care. You know, respect is huge, but you're not going to be effective if you don't try to understand where someone's coming from, and you're never going to understand how they've processed their experiences. That's really what I think we're interested in. That in trauma, we're interested in how people process their experiences, because these experiences shatter people to their core sometimes. Traumatic events shatter your sense of safety, your sense of self-worth, your sense of value. And part of what we need to do, I wouldn't even just say us as peers, because we're very into peer support. It's what we do, we believe in it, but we also, you know, push back against a system that needs to incorporate these values into it as well. Because at the end of the day, if we're talking about mental health, wellness, things like that, we all need to be on the same page. People deserve empathy, respect, trust. They deserve to be empowered. And you know, if we don't, we ignore what's going on. And really, that's the third part of what trauma is, are the effects. We see these effects in people. And there's short-term effects to trauma, and there's long-term effects to trauma. One thing we're starting to realize is that many of the things that we call psychiatric diagnoses can themselves be more symptoms depression sometimes is not a diagnosis, it's a symptom of unaddressed trauma. The research, I think, is showing a lot more. I mean, I brought a list, I'll read down here just the physical long-term effects of trauma. I mean, if this doesn't make you pause and realize how powerful trauma is, it rewires your entire existence. You have immediate physical reactions to trauma, right? Nausea, gastrointestinal distress, sweating and shivering, fainting, muscle tremors or uncontrollable shaking, elevated heartbeat, respiration, blood. This all happens right at the moment. Now we talk about 30, 40 years later, sleep disturbances, nightmares, somatization, which is your increased focus that your body hurts and worrying about your body, lowered resistance to colds and infections, persistent fatigue, elevated cortisol levels, hyperarousal, long-term health effects including heart, liver, autoimmune, and COPD. This is real. And I think that the field of psychiatry, probably starting in the 50s and 60s, got very concerned with biological processes, and then we got medicines. And I'm a consumer of psych meds. It's helped me probably to stay out of hospitals. But at the end of the day, we also have to recognize that biology and genetics and pharmaceuticals is not the whole story. The whole story is someone's literal story. And that's where we begin as peers to try to, I think, peel away the onion, as my boss sometimes says, of what happened to you? Because that's where healing begins, once we understand what happened to us. Not to put it in a weird, power dynamic, Freudian way, because I think Tracy was saying that's not what we do, and Celia was saying too, the power of peer support is in mutuality, it's in that give and take. I get just as much out of what I do at work than the people that I so-called serve, and that's really, if there's people in here who are peers and are interested in this field, one thing you want to try to do is take that hierarchy away and get rid of it, because we all help each other. And I'm thankful to Steve for creating an environment that people think like that. It's really powerful. So then understanding trauma, I was thinking about, and I'm so glad Tracy brought up Darby and Kathy, what are trauma-informed practices. I actually took a blurb from Engaging Women in Peer Support, which really is, you could easily make that book gender neutral and it would be totally applicable, I think, universally to people. But they say that trauma-informed practices provide a new paradigm for organizing services and supports that recognizes the central role that trauma plays in people's lives and shifts the focus from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Trauma-informed services seek to understand what happened to an individual and the meaning that person makes of those experiences. In a trauma-informed program, everyone is educated about trauma and its consequences, and about the importance of people's voices and choices in the services and supports they receive. People are alert for ways to make their environments more healing and less re-traumatizing for both clients and staff. I like how they say that. We're all in it together. How many people how many of you here have maybe used a psych hospital ever? And, not only is that not a healing environment very often for the people that come there, but do the staff look like they're well? Right? I mean, they don't seem like they've become dehumanized as well sometimes. And then they become part of the, aggression, I think, that the environment itself is complicit in creating. Trauma-informed services understand that when you have been traumatized, regaining control over the environment is number one priority. So they emphasize safety, choice, trustworthiness, collaboration, and empowerment. Trauma-informed services support resilience, self-care, self-healing. I mean, this is what we do. I mean, trauma-informed peer support, it's a little bit of a redundant statement because I think that our field, our movement, and I'm sure Celia can talk to this more than me, we invented this. And that we is really, I'm putting myself in there, but the royal you know, this is what we fought for so many years. Traumatic events and healing both occur in a cultural context, so trauma-informed programs also respect and include culturally specific healing modalities. So how we learned a lot about trauma, and then we also went back and read everything that we could find on what consumers, survivors, patients, ex-patients say works and does not work. And then we went back to the lab and said, are we an agency that aligns with all this? And if we're not, let's get rid of what doesn't align. So then we started to develop core values that really were trauma-informed. We aim to create environments that promote people's safety, and that's everyone's safety, and then everyone's safety and comfort. You know, when you go to a psych hospital and somebody is suicidal, or let me rephrase that. Somebody is talking about suicide. Everyone's risk aversion kicks in, and then the staff make themselves feel safe by taking everything away and locking them in a room. So one side feels safe, right? But what does that do to the other person in that hospital? Do they feel safe? I just had a very good friend in the hospital by me, and I could understand why the staff did what they did by taking away a lot of her items. But I refuse to accept the fact that she had to feel completely dehumanized and unsafe in doing so. And so environment's huge for us. Tracy mentioned mutuality, the shared elements of our stories. That is so powerful because that's where the storytelling comes. Storytelling is everything here. I mean, that's, you know, if there's something that we can contribute to the mental health system, it's that we value people's stories. And that's, I think, where healing begins. It helped me. I agree. This was the first job where the scary thing that I've hid my whole adult life was finally allowed to come out and viewed as a strength. That was, you know, the first day home, I told my parents about that. And they started, you know, they almost wanted to come work there. They deal with it. My mother specifically has dealt with many diagnoses of mental health and awful mental health care. So mutuality is huge. Engagement is huge. And, you know, the way that we communicate, we don't rush people, we don't judge people. We allow people to feel and think and be the way they are. And that is so refreshing to not be told, you should do this, you should do that. You know, so many people that in our crew, our peer crew, have been told so many times, should and couldn't. You should do this. Well, you can't do that. You know, we try to erase that from our language because that does not help healing. And then our philosophy of recovery and what wellness is really important because at the end of the day, when you come to an agency like ours, and I'm sure when you come to see Tracy and her organization, recovery and wellness and moving beyond trauma is the expectation. It's not something we just say, oh, you can do this. We expect it. We set the bar high. If you commit to it and you have the right supports, because you can't just commit and then get treated poorly out in the whole system. And you can't go out to a great system and also not commit. If you're committed and you really have the right supports, anyone can get better. And, you know, I always say to my staff, read, I think it was Courtney Harding's research in Vermont on working with individuals that were living with schizophrenia, that were sold the shouldn't and can't BS, and were told that they couldn't ever really live a satisfying life. Those folks proved them all wrong. So recovery is real, it can happen. And then sometimes also I'd say another major thing that we do, and I see a lot of people in this room, I can sense a lot of people in this room are advocates. And advocacy is important. And that's where, Celia, that's where we take it back to that root where we got to educate people on what their rights are, and so too many times people in our field are treated with very lax rights or adherence to rights, very poor justice. We have to educate people on what their rights are. We have to defend them when they need help, and we have to make sure that they're empowered to be their own best advocates, because one thing we should never do is permanently keep people in services. Move on. So I think that I guess the final thing I'd like to say is that it all boils down to what happened. It's storytelling, and that's what trauma-informed peer support is. So unfortunately, we agree up here. It's not going to be like Crossfire.
Hi, Tracy and Josh. Thank you for today's presentation. Josh, you mentioned that people took a look at policies and practices which may not have been trauma-informed. Can you explain what some of those things were that you said you had to get rid of?
Sure. The environmental scans were very important. I think Darby and Kathy, we were in two learning communities, one with Darby and Kathy, and then one, I think, with National Council, but one of them had an environmental scan. And when we started to go through our locations, we were saying, oh my God, this is not a comfortable place to sit, or there's dim lighting here. This might scare people who had traumatic events in places, often violence happens in dimly lit areas, as we all know. And, I think the physical aspects of it, we were doing a lot of, I think, the social aspects of it already, but the physical aspects of it were really shocking. I mean, to sit down with a checklist and say, ooh, this is not a hopeful environment. There's nothing on the wall here. Well, how does that make people feel? It makes them feel maybe like it's similar to a hospital. Not that we would ever behave that way, but physically we had to change a lot of that. And I was so shocked by that, and the before and after too, to look at it and be like, wow, I love coming to work more now that there's that we invested a little bit in painting the walls a color that's not white, And I think that's also the part of the mutuality. We're all in it together. Yeah.
I kind of think I heard you talk about prevention.
Yeah.
And I don't know where is prevention in this field. So if anybody here can talk about mental health prevention, where to start, can we ward that off? Even though we know what you pointed out, the lack of communication and connection could contribute to a person's in a space. How do we get ahead of it?
Peer support is supposed to be best practice. Mary Ellen Copeland has the draft plan, and that really, while it's not one of my favorite things because it's very illness focused, it is something that is a prevention plan. You figure out what your coping skills are, your wellness toolbox, and then you create your daily maintenance plan of the things you need to do for yourself every day to be well, to feel well, then things you might want to do. Then there's like a triggers part, what triggers you, what can you do for those triggers. There's early warning signs, like okay, when these things are happening. And it's very redundant kind of for each section. Then there's when things are breaking down, and this is all kind of stuff that you have for yourself. And then there's a crisis plan and a post-crisis plan. A crisis plan would be something that you share with other people, so this way you can stay in control when you're feeling out of control. And these people say, hey, this is what they want done. So that's like something that is available and in place, I think, all over the world.
Some people talking about post-trauma prevention. So that's preventing another episode. Preventing but primary prevention. We don't talk about that. Primary prevention. What is that?
Well, I think that, think we have to combat things like racism, sexual assault head on. You know, I mean, we're all reading about this issue in Stanford, is it? You know, and it's, let's just call it what it is, you know, rape. And I think that we're, you know, or like I was talking about deindustrialization and the lack of jobs here. I mean, at what point do we stand up and say, we Americans need jobs, you know, and human rights. Yeah, I like how Tracy framed it. You know, it's, we have to just really recognize what are these triggers that make us not well. And I think a lot of them are social and economic determinants. Yeah, and that, I think prevention has to start there. We have to promote a world that's not okay with poverty and racism and violence against women and things of that nature. Yeah.
I hate to be the terrible timekeeper on this. I hope this conversation continues during the reception and dinner a little bit later. Thank you, Tracy and Josh, for